would be, I would be remiss if I didn't keep reminding everybody about who Jeffrey Epstein actually was in the financial world, what this myth of this man that allowed all of the criminality to occur. It never would have occurred if he didn't have a myth. And he wouldn't have had Maxwell in his life and all of this stuff. So it's important to sort of go back to the myth and debunk it yet again and give the real history there, because there's so much garbage around coming out of Donald's camp, out of his own pie hole and out of the camp around him of, oh, I didn't really know him, or he stole someone, all this stuff, all these different stories. And then the journalists not really going into, not focusing on the money. You've got to focus on the money. The girls were the spoils and the op. As sad and horrible as it is, and the victims, the survivors, deserve. Oh God, they're being treated so terribly. It's hard. I get stopped in even what I wanted to say when I think of them and how they're yet again being iced out of any process involving this person who's still alive that trafficked them, Ghislaine.
Yep.
And everything that's being released is all around. They're just left out. It's just like, God. Okay, that's my side thing. It's just so upsetting to me. Yeah. So upsetting to me. And it should be upsetting to everybody. Back to Epstein. So look, the myth that he had in his heyday, when everybody was flocking to him, and by everybody, I mean these very powerful people from academia to politics, across the board, business leaders flocking to this guy, this Goomba, right? Because who was not very sophisticated, not very well educated, none of those things, because he was this magical, mystical money wizard, right? And he managed big, private wealth, big accounts like Wexner, like Ron Lauder Edgar Bronfman was one of his his first big private wealth client when Epstein was at Bear Stearns. And this whole thing that he did with everybody's wealth that had everyone like, oh, he's magic, give your money to Jeffrey, he's magic. The whole promise of him, the myth of him was that he could take all of your money and manage it in such a way that you didn't have to pay taxes. So what he did, as I've been saying for 10 years, when I discovered his offshore accounts, is while at Bear Stearns, he had a big client, his biggest client, that Ace Greenberg, the head of Bear Stearns, handed to Jeffrey Epstein as his first big client. Now, he was in a level, Epstein was put in a level, here's Ace Greenberg, top of the Bear Stearns, and Epstein was slid in right underneath him. Did he work his way up? Did he matriculate through the Bear Stearns hierarchy? Did he put in his time? No.
What was he, like 23?
He was a teacher and a tutor at the school where Ace Greenberg's kids went, his daughter. He was tutoring his daughter, and he slid right from that job at Dalton as a tutor, teacher, into this sort of VP slot for the private wealth. And Ace Greenberg, for whatever reasons, hands him Edgar Bronfman to manage Edgar's money, the Bronfman money. This is a fortune. This was the Seagram's empire. Now, Samuel Bronfman who founded Seagram's Liquor, was business partners. These are Canadian businessmen, business partners with Meyer Lansky, who created offshore money laundering. All of that was created by Lansky and some Swiss banks. And that was in a reaction to Al Capone being popped by, everyone thinks it's the guy that it wasn't. It was Elmer Iree, who was head of the IRS division of sort of looking at crimes, right, at the time. And everybody knows the story of how Al Capone went down for taxes, because crimes were crimes. Let's just get him for that. And gangsters were all prepared in those times. And I think pretty much through the 70s and 80s, American gangsters were very prepared to, like, we'll go to prison for murder. It was hard to get it because people wouldn't talk. They'd go to prison for those crimes. But to go to prison for taxes meant your money's getting seized. Mm-hmm. And that freaked everybody out at the time. Freaked out Meyer Lansky. And he went, this is very well documented in all kinds of written things in Lansky's own words, went over to Switzerland and created offshore banking. And that's why he's known as the person who invented money laundering. That's all Epstein was doing. That's what he was doing. So he got in trouble managing Edgar Bronfman's money. Again, the son of Samuel Bronfman, the heir of the Seagram's empire, Seagram's being Meyer Lansky's business partner, Samuel Bronfman being his big business partner. So I don't know. Now Jeffrey's in there, right? Epstein's in there. And he gets in trouble with the SEC. And not just with Bronfman, how he's handling Bronfman stuff with some other things. And that's when Ace Greenberg moved him over. He supposedly left Bear Stearns, but he didn't. He just moved into doing offshore tax havens with two other big Bear Stearns executives. So they set up all of these offshore accounts. It's there in the Panama Papers. It came out in that, and it's blah, 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 blah. Bahama Leaks, all of those things show you Jeffrey Epstein's offshores and how they're connected. Historically, were connected and set up with Bear Stearns executives. So that's the magical, mystical wizardry of Jeffrey Epstein. He literally just did offshore tax havens for people. And that's what sort of attracted him, attracted these big wealthy people to him. And also he was demonstrating all this wealth, and it just looked like, okay, this guy is the wizard, right? He's the wizard of this financial world, private wealth. Okay. The other thing to remember about Jeffrey Epstein that's pretty important is, and it went right out of my head as soon as I said that. Hang on a second. This is my old age and my menopause. Just everybody hang on with me. Tax havens. What else was I saying, Greg?
You were saying tax. You were going to go in. Were you going to go into the Robert Maxwell stuff, and were you going to go into the Iran Contra?
This is it. This is all before that. No, that's later. We'll get to that.
That's what I thought. Yeah.
That's later. Is this time that Jeffrey was doing this with Ace Greenberg was the time that Ace Greenberg's only private client. He only had one because he was running all Bear Stearns. He kept one individual as his private client and literally was like this guy's sort of Jeffrey Epstein, his little money manager. And the only person that Ace Greenberg was privately managing at that time was Donald Trump. So I bring this up because, and that's all in Wayne Barrett's work. If you look at Wayne Barrett's reporting, it's all in there. I bring this up because this is the late 70s, early 80s. This is years before Mar-a-Lago and Palm Beach. This was even before Jeffrey Epstein was sort of this nom de guerre in New York City, before he was even the wizard of wizardry. And I'm bringing this all up because it's very, very likely that Donald and Jeffrey knew each other, Epstein knew each other years before and were possibly collaborating. I can't even imagine that Ace Greenberg wouldn't have, because it was his money that Donald was playing around with, that he was helping Donald, helping finance those casinos, getting him set up. Ace was underwriting and taking extreme risks for Donald, and no one knows why. So with these sort of weird instruments he was creating out of Bear Stearns and with Bear Stearns money. So it's kind of impossible to conceive that the offshores and what Jeffrey was doing weren't somehow integral into those instruments and in what was happening between Ace and Donald. It's likely it could be that they were not, but I'm just saying, do not forget the money. And when you go back into the money trail, all of the lies about who introduced who to who met who, when did they meet, what were they doing, you realize all of that. The reason why the story keeps changing is it's all garbage. It's all garbage. No one can keep track of how many different ways they've told some fantasy of how they know one another. These guys' roots go all the way back into this. And maybe the reason everybody has to not talk about it is we don't know where that fucking money was coming from. We just know it was being pushed through offshores. So if Donald Trump was using Jeffrey Epstein in the money laundering circus that those guys were in, and that it could be legal, some of it, right, for tax shelters or whatever. If that was going on, I wonder why all these IRS people keep getting fired by Donald. What has he gone through, 6 so far? Listen to what Senator Ron Wyden has been asking for. He's on this. And we need to keep kind of come at him and not let him get distracted with other things, because I know there's a lot going on in the Senate. We're going to talk about some other things, that in a little bit. There's a lot happening in Washington. I get it. But it could be that there's a money trail between Donald and Epstein. And we don't know where the money was coming from. We don't know where the money was going. But eventually, where it was ending up, we don't know the purpose and intent of it. I'm just putting it out there. There are possibly some answers we can get from the tax man, just like we got on Al Capone.